Hi, I'm Bob Hochmuth, County Agent with the University of Florida IFAS Extension. At this location, we are utilizing essentially all native plants, each one with a specific purpose to encourage beneficial species. Some of the beneficial species that we would like to see encouraged in this planting area include birds, beneficial insects, and native pollinators. This is one of the many strategies that we're utilizing in a whole farm approach to integrated pest management. Hi Carolyn, what you looking for?
Hi Bob, I'm looking for insects on this elderberry.
This is Carolyn Saft, our Suwannee County Extension agent and an expert on native plants. And out here in the planting, Carolyn, you've got a lot of different species of native plants, and this is elderberry here. What are some of the things that you're looking for when you establish these native plantings?
Well, there are several things that we're looking for, Bob. We're looking for plants that are evergreen, so that there's year-round cover for the different insects or birds. We're also looking for those low-maintenance plants that don't need a lot of clipping or fertilizer or water. We're also looking for plants that have multifunctions, so that they have food, cover, whether that be seeds, pollen.
So a plant that has seed perhaps might be attracting in something like some of the birds and trying to increase the diversity of the bird population here, and hopefully some of those birds are going to eat some of the insects on our vegetables and fruits that we have planted here. In terms of the ones that provide pollen or nectar, are we targeting a certain time of the year, or what is our strategy in terms of providing pollen and nectar?
Well, that's another thing that we're taking into account. We're trying to figure out plants that will start blooming in late February and bloom all through the season into late October, even into November. And we would do that by selecting, plants with different flower sizes, plants with different flower colors, so that we can attract a variety of different insects. The thing to keep in mind is the more diverse the plants you have, the more diversity you're going to get in your insect populations.
So one or two plants is not going to get the job done for us on the whole farm approach that we have here, and therefore we have a whole bunch of different species. But over the period from February until at the end of the season in November or December, we have multiple period of time when we have lots of different pollen and nectar providers. So we want to keep that constant supply, and we need a lot of different native plants preferably to be able to accomplish that. So that's really good. I see a lot of these plants in this area look like they're pretty thrifty, kind of take care of themselves pretty well, and I think that's the idea that you have with the native plants, ones that are adapted to this area.
Right, we were looking for plants. We looked at the soil type, we looked at the sun conditions, and we were trying to select those plants that would do well with little or no inputs. And so if you look at these plants around us, many of these are naturally mounding plants, so there's no pruning involved, and they'll just continue to mature. We've spaced them out so that they have good, healthy areas so that they can get air circulation and thrive on their own, really.
So we don't have to worry a whole lot about irrigating, and we hopefully aren't going to have to do anything in terms of a pest management approach in here, that they're bringing in good guys. And I know there's a lot of interest in native pollinators now, trying to bring back populations of native pollinators. So that would be one other key aspect. And I oftentimes see things like lady beetles in here and other beneficial insects. So we're providing sort of a harbor in here for a lot of beneficial species to build populations, and then hopefully be able to go out into our farming area and help us to manage some of the pests there as well. I noticed you were looking in the elderberry here, and there's some unique characteristics for some of these plants, and maybe tell us a little bit about what you would expect this elderberry to be able to provide. What purposes would the elderberry have in this particular planting?
Well, elderberry is one of those great plants that has so many different functions. It can provide cover, it can provide nectar, and eventually it'll provide seed or berries for the various birds and other mammals that might be beneficial. So the other thing that elderberry has are these things, these protrusions, if you will, that are part of the plant, and they're called extrafloral nectaries. And so these extrafloral nectaries secrete a sugary substance that will give insects energy when the plant is not in bloom. So this plant is providing a food source, an energy source for insects even when it's not in bloom. So there's lots of plants that do that, but because this one provides for so many different types of beneficial insects, beneficial birds, and pollinators, this is a really great plant to grow.
Wow, so this is like a 3-in-1 type of plant, and the more of those that you can incorporate into the planting, I know that that would be very beneficial. I was just watching one of the insects as you talk there go up and get a little bit of that sugar water, and now is walking back down the stem. So this is that's a really interesting approach here, and all those little things matter when you put them together to encourage these populations to build. In addition to the native plants that you have here, are there some other strategies that we can use to encourage, for instance, native pollinators, something that's relatively simple that almost anyone could do either in their home yard or on a farm?
Oh, absolutely. There are several things that you can do. One of the things that comes to mind is establishing natural nesting areas. So things like snags that will not only serve as a perch for those predator birds. Another benefit of the snag, Bob, is that that is an area where beetles have been, and that's where a lot of the solitary bees will go in and use those beetle tunnels once they've been abandoned by the beetles. So this snag, actually, if you think of it as nature's bed and breakfast, it has cavities for nesters, it has perches for the predatory birds, and then it has all kinds of insects that are both beneficial and pollinators.
Wow. So we don't necessarily want to clean up all the snags around the woodlands if we happen to have a wooded area on our property. And many farms do have a wooded area. But if we don't have a wooded area around the farm, are there some alternatives, especially for something like the native pollinators, that we can do to encourage some of those pollinators on our property?
Well, you can also save stumps and brush piles, and if you don't want to have a brush pile, another thing that you can use are solitary bee nesting tubes, and that can be something just made out of bamboo, taking sections of that, wrapping it together and sticking it in a tree. So that would be another way to encourage pollinators.
So in the case of the nesting tubes, I oftentimes see them with different size diameter holes for different species of some of the solitary predatory kinds of bees. So that would be another way that just about anybody could create that on their own, and you can certainly purchase those kinds of predator bee boxes as well. Are there some other things that we can do, just sort of a general management strategy to encourage or not maybe discourage pollinators? Or are there some things that we can do to encourage some of these native pollinators?
Well, one thing that I can think of, Bob, is to have some areas of undisturbed soil. And so you want that bare ground because that's where about 70% of our solitary bees nest. So even taking away mulch from an area or just not tilling an area would be a really good strategy to help encourage our pollinators.
Okay. Well, those are all really good tips. It seems like in the old days, maybe wherever all of the farmland was plowed, that would be really difficult for those 70% of our bees to be able to encourage and build populations whatsoever. So any kind of conservation tillage practices that we can do, there's a lot of conservation tillage, and no-till is one of the examples there, and that allows the bees to build up populations in the ground where they normally would survive. Of course, anything we can do to minimize pesticide sprays unnecessarily in those areas also would allow the bees to be given a chance. And I've just noticed here in the last 2 years, since we've implemented a lot of these practices that you're describing, I see those native bee populations building incredibly quickly here. So all these little things are apparently making a huge difference on our whole farm approach to integrated pest management here. Carolyn, thanks for your great expertise and development of this particular strategy in our whole farm approach.
I'm glad to be a part of the team, Bob. It's been a lot of fun and we're learning a lot.